I don't know what to keep my mind on.
All right, welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast, and today we are continuing with our review of movies in the contention for the 2026 Academy Awards. I'm sure all of you are still reeling from the reviews that we did of Wicked and Wicked for Good with the guys from the Story Proof podcast. But today we are going to be taking a look at Bugonia, which by far is, I would say, probably like one of the strangest movies that we've ever seen. And I would even say to you, like, there's a bit of there's a bit of a dark humor about it, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And it's more and if you think about it, it's more straightforward because this is coming to us from Yorgos Lanthimos, who gave us Poor Things, which we reviewed a few years ago. And I would even say that it was one of those movies that after reviewing it, Lee, I think you put a moratorium saying that it's one of those movies that shall never ever be mentioned by name ever again.
Was not a fan. Not a fan.
Right, but but here I would say it's a little bit more straightforward, and I would even say it's a little, it's a little, it makes a little more sense because it's a lot easier to follow. But before we dive in,
remember to say that, right? It's true to say that, even though it is a pretty wild movie, but I will give it a lot more credit than I will for the previous one we reviewed for Poor Things.
Well, this is also an adaptation of a 2003 South Korean movie called Save the Green Planet. So it is kind of interesting to see just how just how much of a divergence or how close it kind of follows the plot. But before we dive in, remember to like, comment, subscribe. We're slowly growing our audience, so if we can hit the accelerator and get more people in the Movie Popes army, that'd be great because we are always putting a lot of content on this channel. Some people ask, why do we do it if we don't have that many subs? My answer to that is we do it because we love it. So if you're enjoying what we're doing and you want to share in that love, definitely subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it lets us know that we're doing something great, and it makes us feel better about ourselves. You know it does, Lee. I mean, I send you those texts, and you're like, oh, yeah, that's so cool, man. So Bugonia, as I was watching this movie, it reminded me a lot of Don Quixote meets Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right? Because you've got this hapless conspiracy theorist who is very much like Don Quixote. He's very much, enraptured in his own thoughts and his own beliefs, and he kind of brings in this poor fella Don, his autistic cousin, who, like Sancho Panza, it really is just being roped into this whole mess. But instead of charging at windmills and pretending to be a knight, it's more of alien invasions and kidnapping CEOs of big pharmaceuticals. And it's one of those it's one of those movies that when you watch it, you kind of have to wonder just how weird can it get. But given the movies that we've reviewed so far, I would say this is a movie that at least from my perspective, I don't know how you feel, Lee. At least this one here, it's a bit more palatable, right? Because
absolutely,
movies like because another movie that reviewed earlier this year, One Battle After Another. I mean, it's one of those. I mean, that was a movie where I was still trying to figure out what exactly was the central theme or the central plot to it, because it was very much political posturing, but you really didn't know what was going on there. Whereas movies like Wicked or Frankenstein, these were visually rich movies, and if I would be surprised if they didn't win, an award for special effects or anything like that. But but movies like that, they kind of sacrifice, the story for something that is going to be very pleasing to the eye. Whereas here, Bugonia is very stripped down. It's very simplistic in its execution. You've got a very small cast of characters, and and it's it's pretty much limited to one space, really. So one could say it almost plays out like a stage drama, really, right? Because it's all depending on the actors and their talent and skills to kind of make the scene come alive for us. Now, granted, there are a few elements you throw in. There are a few special effects. We'll talk about that as we progress in the review. But compared to the other movies that we reviewed so far, this is very much stripped down and very simplistic in its execution, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, So, Lee, what were your thoughts as you watched this movie?
Yeah, no, I think it was honestly like just from the start, right? You kind of get this like kind of like weird thing with bees, right? And we get to learn about our characters, not a ton about them, but we can tell that they're very much some wild conspiracy theorists. And I think, well, let me rephrase that, right? Because it's really Teddy, right? So Teddy is kind of, I guess, our main character, right?
Uh-huh.
Some might consider it a hero, some people might consider the antagonist. Kind of hard to tell, but and he's played by, I mean, Jesse Plemons, right? Holy shit, what a great job he did in this.
I mean, if you think that it's perfectly cast too, because he looks like the kind of person you would suspect of being
Oh
that
yeah,
kind of person, you know.
yeah, absolutely. And he totally knocked this out of the park. And he brought up a great point, right? This is a very bare bones film, right? There's very few sets are involved with this, so it's absolutely carried by the performances. And Jesse Plemons did great with this. And as I also pointed out, right, you got Don, right, who's his autistic cousin, that's played by actually, I believe his name is Aiden Delbis, and he's on the spectrum as well. And you have kind of these two. You kind of get this very clear information, right, about the dynamic, right? Teddy's obviously the one that's kind of doing everything, right? And Don's just kind of there, right? He's the epitome of just a follower. He's there. And they're related, right? They're cousins, I believe, if I remember right.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, yeah.
So, they have this kind of familial relationship. But, I always felt bad for Don because it always felt like he was just kind of getting engrossed in stuff that he didn't really want to be a part of. And I guess we'll talk about that a little bit later because, just kind of was very unfortunate. I felt like how he kind of got swooped up into everything. But yeah, it's an interesting thing because the film, it makes it very clear that there's some conspiracy out there, right? They believe in, something really weird's going on, but they don't really like show their cards early on, right? So we know that they're planning to kidnap the CEO of this large pharmaceutical company called Auxiloth, right? But I like how the film, it doesn't really explain why they want to do it up front, right? They kind of like let it simmer until kind of it happens. And then they make it very clear what the overarching issue is. So you have Teddy and Donnie, right? They kidnap the CEO of Auxiloth. Character is Michelle, played by Emma Stone. And you see the pair try to kidnap her, and well, this is where that like kind of comedy aspect comes into it. Because Michelle kicks their ass, right? Which I thought was funny, and I like how they kind of like set it up, right? Because we see that Michelle was like training to like defend herself and stuff, so it kind of makes sense that she'd be capable of doing this. She's not a damsel in distress, right? She's a female that can kind of keep her own when it comes out to this. But Teddy's eventually able to sedate her, and they're successfully able to kidnap her. And one of the things that they do is they shave poor Emma Stone's head again. Now I don't know what you, Luka. Is this like some like weird thing with the director? I don't know why it's weird that's happened twice, right? Like it doesn't happen a lot, but it's weird that Emma Stone has to have her head shaved twice by this director. So is this some weird kink this guy has? He's like, I need to have a bald Emma Stone if I want to have a good performance.
Well, I can't speak to Yorgos Lanthimos' obsession with shaving women, but I imagine, like, because as I'm watching, I'm putting myself in Teddy's shoes. I'm thinking, all right, like, if this woman is an Andromedan, right? She's she's got the the connection to her home planet in the mothership, right? We got to be able to like isolate her so they don't know what's going on. So in his mind, he's probably thinking to himself, maybe her hair is like an antenna. So if we shave it off, then then there's radio silence and they don't know what's going on. Interesting fact, by the way. So I've been watching a lot of videos about about the ancient Near East influence on the Bible. So like mythology and all that stuff. What I thought was interesting was that St. Paul tells women they need to cover their hair, which you would think is just for modesty, but surprisingly, in Greco-Roman medicine, women have long hair because it's supposed to act as a way of drawing semen from the man in order to get pregnant. So if a man has long hair, then that basically means he's effeminate, and if a woman shaves her head, that means she's not really interested in doing her womanly duty of getting pregnant and continuing the species. So I just thought it was quite an interesting thing that that they shave that, because Teddy's probably tracking something like that in his mind, and obviously he's not thinking along sexual lines. He's thinking more of like, I don't want to get founded by the Andromedans. But I just figured it'd be a very interesting thing for him to think of as as he's planning this out, because it's not something he's doing randomly, right? He's been plotting this for quite a while. But
Oh yeah.
but the fact that he's going about having poor Don shave this woman, it's just it's just really hilariously tragic. And I would even say too, like, as the movie progresses, Don comes out as the more rational of the two, because whenever Teddy's presenting these things, Don is actually asking some genuinely interesting questions, like stuff that because because even though Teddy is supposed to look like the normal person, because he's got he's the guy with the job, right? He's got to work to support everybody, and Don's just doing his thing around the house. I mean, Don has actually got a better grip on reality than Teddy, really. And as we'll find out later, this isn't Ted's first rodeo.
No. That's very true. And it's interesting too, because like, I mean, obviously they're really they're really deep into whatever lore they feel like these Andromedans have, right? Because they go as far as chemically castrating themselves. So
that part I had to stop the movie and just say to myself, okay, that's going a bit too far now.
That's invested. That's being invested, right? Like, that's a part, like, hey, I'm not gonna let anything bug me. Like, this is your all-in to your belief, right or wrong, right? And you do. And this is where we kind of find out, right? So they shave the head, so they have Michelle, right? Kind of like being held captive down in the basement of their house. And we find out very bluntly, right? They think that she's an alien. And to your point, I love how Teddy tries to describe how he knows she's an alien, right? And I love that, like, everything that he says is like totally mundane and totally like, it doesn't feel like it has any impact. It's like, oh, look, she's got narrow feet. She's got thin cuticles. They even say something like that, she has high hair density. And like, he's just going through all these things. So I'm like, oh my God, like, this guy's totally off his rocker. Like, this is something that you can attribute to lots of people. And I like how, Don kind of points out, like, hey, how can he tell? And then as he's describing everything, I'm like, is this really how you're telling them? Because I don't know if I understand this. But I like how they kind of go through it. And their whole plan is they want to talk to these Andromedans, right? So they think that Michelle is an Andromedan. They're going to set up this meeting with their emperor to broker a peace treaty for humanity, right? That is their purpose. So, what was your reaction when you found out that kind of the story was going to be around aliens, right? Because they don't outright say it. We see like a lot of this like kind of weird conspiracy theory stuff. We don't really know, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, we think you're an alien. How did you react to that being where everything was going?
well, my bigger question is, and might have gotten lost as I was watching. So, is he under the belief or the assumption that the Andromedans are going to wipe out humanity? Is that why he's trying to organize this parlay with the Emperor?
That's what I understood. Yeah, I was under the impression that he felt like they were, setting up to destroy humanity, and he was there to try to like deal with it, right? Because he kind of like talks about like the bees and all this other stuff that's going on. So I think he's of the impression that she is this alien race, and they're gonna wipe out everybody.
Well, I'm not too disappointed with that twist. I actually kind of like it too, because it actually kind of like takes the story to a whole nother level, right? It adds.
Yeah, it was very unexpected. It was just like, okay, like on everything you go for, you're like alien.
It's kind of like with Abigail when you think about it. Except
yeah. It's
except
true,
with
right?
aliens and not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there. Aliens is obviously a very prevalent one, but probably not one that's the first that's going to come to mind, right? But yeah, that's what the purpose is. So now we have Teddy trying to have Michelle kind of get this meeting set up while she's kidnapped. And I do want to talk about the movie does such a cool job of sprinkling in more stuff about the dynamic between these characters, right? Because on the surface, you're like, oh, it's, Teddy is, kidnapping her because, he thinks that she's an alien. But then as you kind of move forward, there's other things that kind of pop up that make you question, is this really what it's all about, right? Because we see that, for instance, Teddy works for Auxiloth, right? Or he works for like a company that's associated with it, right?
Yeah, like
So
it's like a subsidiary or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Thank you,
Yeah.
subsidiary. Exactly what I was looking for. So yeah, so you kind of see that. So it's like, oh, okay, that adds kind of this little extra interest in it. It's like, okay, is it because he hates his job? Because you see him kind of interact with some of his coworkers, and one of the coworkers is injured, and he's like, oh, well, you have to sue, right? You can't be held accountable because the machine you were working with hurt you. And you see, like, the other character, she was very apprehensive about doing it because she's like, I don't want to make waves, so I'd rather just sit here in pain for something that happened. So it's like, oh, is it something dealing with that? Then there's kind of this odd, also, like, story about a cop that's around town, and there's a lot of hints that he sexually abused Teddy as a young when he was babysitting him. So then it's like, okay, like, did that like kind of like turn him down this path of kind of like losing his sense of humanity because of this type of stuff? So there's kind of like a lot of these like interesting things that pop up. The other thing that I thought was fun, right? So there's this countdown, right? To it's like a solar eclipse, right? And they feel like the solar eclipse is when everything is supposed to happen. And I did like how for this like countdown that they do, I like how it has the flat Earth, right? Because that's obviously a very common conspiracy theory, is the flat Earth. And I always thought that that was super cool that they do this countdown and it's a flat Earth. It's like, hey, is Teddy really understanding more than we're giving him credit for? Is he right about more than we're thinking, or is he just batshit crazy? So I just really liked how there's a lot of things that they start to sprinkle in that kind of make you question everything that's going on. So Teddy, right? So he's getting frustrated with kind of everything that happens with Michelle, to the point that as they kind of continue, he straps her up and he starts electrocuting her, right? And he's like sitting there electrocuting her, and I guess there's some type of reading that he gets where he finds out that Michelle is actually royalty, which I was just like, okay, I don't know how you're getting that from that. But man, like, that really freaked me out when you start to see her get electrocuted. So I'm like, holy shit, like this is really escalating fast.
Yeah, and there's blood coming out of her mouth too, so.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So you kind of see this, and this is another case of I really like Jesse Plemons acting in this, because you could sense, right? And I'll ask you this if you got the same feeling. You could sense that he's questioning if he's right, when he's electrocuting her. Did you get that same feel when he's like sitting there doing it? Like it almost looks at time that he's like panicked that, oh no, am I really doing this wrong? And I really like that. Did you kind of sense some of that in his performance there?
Well, are you saying? Do you mean in the sense he's doing it wrong because he thinks this isn't an Andromedan, this is a human,
Yes.
or
Yes.
Okay? I didn't get that sense at all because Don, I would say Don, sees that more of maybe you're trying to kill a human being and not an alien. Maybe you've taken this too far. That's what I was saying. That Don is the more rational of the two. But I do want to go back to what you were saying earlier about that, about his motivations for going after Michelle, because
Mm.
we do see flashbacks and hints of what's going on with his mother, right?
Yes,
It's played by Alicia Silverstone. By the
I
way.
know, right? I did not recognize her as the mom, but yes.
So the way I understand it is, is she, she kind of suffers this condition and she's in hospice care, and
Mhm.
and we see those flashbacks, and I would even say I think the flashbacks, they have some sort of grain of truth to it, but they kind of get elevated to this mad level conspiracy to kind of reflect what's going on in Teddy's head. Do you
Mm.
think maybe he was targeting Michelle because he kind of deems her as responsible in some direction for his mother's condition?
Oh yeah, absolutely, right. And I think this is why this film succeeds at what it is, right? It's for exactly that type of stuff, because you start to get more and more stuff sprinkled into that, right? So I'm gonna diverge just really quickly because we're gonna get to the dinner scene right now, anyways, where I feel like all that gets pulled to fruition, and we'll definitely digest that because I think that is the this to me is the big scene that sticks out to me as far as something that just works so well, right? Because for Teddy, he's like, oh, she's royalty, right? Whatever shocking her did, whatever reading he got, it's like, oh, she's royalty. So now they're gonna have this quote unquote nice dinner. And initially, Teddy kind of talks about some of this stuff. There's some conversation about the bees. And you see that Teddy blames the company for the bees dying off, right? So there's a part of that starts to strike up that, oh, maybe this is more than just him thinking she's an alien, because he's a beekeeper and he points to Auxiloth, right, as what's killing the bees. And then there's the even bigger revelation, right, that you say, right, where Michelle's talking and Michelle's like, you know what? I remember you, Teddy, right? Your mom, she was suffering a lot, right? And we were trying to do something for her, and it kind of left her in this catatonic state, right? So once again, right? So first you have the bees, right? Which is integral to his character, right? He's a beekeeper. He points to Oxalate as being the problem. And then now you also bring in this, whole mother aspect. And yeah, absolutely. I think this is where, as an audience, you start to think that, what? His motivations might not be truly for the fact that she's an alien.
Right.
I think
it's not altruistic, quote unquote.
oh,
It's more
yes,
selfish.
absolutely, right, yeah. And that's what I love about it, because really you can look at it either way, right? You might look at that just like, hey, you know what? She's an alien and everything happens to happen from that. But I think of the viewpoint that this really paints Teddy into a much darker light. I mean, much darker than, kidnapping someone already is. But I mean, he puts everything really on Michelle's shoulders for everything that's wrong. And it just feels like the fact that she's a quote unquote alien is just a byproduct of his hatred for everything else that she represents. And that to me is what really elevated this for me. Like, once you start to see that, it's like, oh shit, this guy probably doesn't even believe the stuff that he's saying. He's just blaming her for everything that's going wrong in his life.
Right. It's kind of right. Really, the alien invasion is more of an excuse rather than
Yes.
just saying, hey, I'm just going to Luigi Mangione you because you fucked up my mom, and I'm going to get even with you. But I would even say, like, so to go back to the flashbacks, I mean the flashbacks do offer context of what's going on, but
yes,
but it's very off-putting because you sort of get the idea of what's going on here, but it's kind of like we know what the backstory is, but is the narrator being reliable? Can we really trust what
True.
he's saying, right?
True.
Because
Yeah.
Because obviously the big one is, the mother's just floating up in the air and Teddy's kind of holding on to her like she's a balloon or something like that. So
yes.
it's kind of one of those things where it's like, it's the truth, but it's not the complete truth. You know what I mean? It's
very
like,
true, very true.
It would be like asking a 7-year-old to describe, well, how did the house burn down, right? I mean, the kid would probably say, well, there was like a
I set
talking
it on fire.
well, either that or it was like, the talking beaver in the closet, was gnawing at the floor, and I tried to scare him off with fire because Grandma told me to do that,
Mm,
and then I accidentally set the whole house on fire. But it wasn't my fault. I was trying to
mhm.
get rid of the angry talking beaver. Like the way that Teddy thinks, it's a juvenile way about it. I mean, granted, I mean, we've all been in that position where we feel like, we're owed some restitution because something was done to us that was very personal, right? But
Yeah,
I think it's safe to say not all of us would kind of go out of our way to get physical retribution against the person who perpetrated that against us. Um,
yes,
Although, I mean, but at the same time, you also kind of have to wonder, because as we'll find out later, does he really believe in what he's doing? Because he's very adamant that Michelle is a member of Andromedan royalty, and that she has the direct line to the Emperor about calling off this invasion. But at the same time, you do have that added element. So so anything that he's been doing before, it was just routine. Whereas here, this is personal, right?
yeah,
it's
yep,
kind of like being a cop, and then one day you're going at and then one day you're going after a criminal who, I don't know, who you know shot a family member of yours, and now you're taking extra pleasure in going after this person
yeah,
because this is someone who directly hurt your family. The fact that you're going after this perpetrator, this criminal, and maybe taking a little bit of pleasure in beating him into submission, yeah, that's like an added bonus. But
yeah.
but it's like, well, on the surface level, objectively, we're saying, well, he's doing his quote unquote job, but on the subjective level, there's more to it.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's where I think we see that all kind of come to fruition because Teddy's been aggressive with Michelle. He's slapped her, right. He's definitely showed a propensity for anger problems, and at the dinner sequence, he literally lunges across the table and attacks Michelle, right. So I think that there's obviously like a lot of anguish there, right, because if he truly feels that she's there to, him connecting with the Andromedans is going to lead to humanity's rescue. He's doing kind of a piss poor job right now by attacking what's deemed royalty, right? I guess it kind of reminds me of Quill, right? Where he attacks Thanos and causes kind of everything to happen. It's kind of similar to this, where it's like, oh no, like if you truly feel like humanity can be saved by this deal that you're about to broker, if you attack her and kill her, well, then humanity's screwed. So where do you go from there?
Mhm.
But I like how Teddy attacks Michelle, but eventually Donnie's able to come by and subdues Michelle by hitting her in the back of the head with the butt of a shotgun, which is a very common trope for knocking people out. You just hit them with guns and they kind of get knocked out. And as everything's kind of happening, the police officer, the one that assaulted Teddy as a kid, shows up. So there's kind of this like, oh god, like is the cop gonna capture them, or are we gonna know what's gonna happen? So we kind of see them split up, where Teddy goes outside with the cop to show him, his bees, and Michelle, she kind of has this very like heart to heart conversation with Donnie, being like, hey, I know that you don't really believe in this. I know you think that this is crazy. I just want to kind of like let you go. And something I was not expecting, right? So Donnie is sitting there and he turns the gun and he kills himself.
Yeah, he
Um,
pulls a private pile, basically.
yeah, exactly. Yep, exactly. Yep, exactly like that. And there's kind of obviously kind of you're gonna hear the shotgun outside. So Teddy ends up killing the cop by releasing the bees. And has I think grabs like a shovel or something and just kind of like caves in the cop's head
Yeah.
before running inside and finding a dead Donnie. Um, and man, I felt so bad for Donnie, right? I mean, and it's interesting because I don't know what the story wants us to get from a character like his. I was very much conflicted because it's like, Donnie's obviously, kind of seems like a kind-hearted guy. He seems to have kind of this more like he kind of seems to let on more than it has. but then also because he has like these mental issues, it's like, are you trying to say that like because he has mental issues that he's more susceptible to stuff like this? Are you trying to say that like I was just very conflicted with what they wanted to do with this character, but I was very sad to see that because he obviously feels very much, he had a very good relationship with his cousin on paper, right, in his mind, and obviously, Teddy's been pretty much like manipulating him all this time, and it just made me feel so sad that this character had to go through this, by having everything kind of come crushing down on him. So what do you think about Donnie's character? I know he wasn't like super prevalent, but gosh, it was a real shame when he kind of turned the gun on himself because I wasn't expecting that at all.
Well, I mean, the thing is that Donnie, to your point, he has been manipulated and abused by Teddy, right? Teddy's kind of trying to mold him into following his his way of thinking. And to Donnie's credit, I mean, he's pretty much resisted it. Like he's gone along with it, but he's never really bought into it, right?
Yes, yeah, I'd agree with that.
What I would say about the whole confrontation that leads to him, private piling himself at the end. I think it's him coming to the realization that, yeah, I mean, I've maybe thought that Teddy might not be right in the head, but I've never really wanted to articulate. And then here's this lady here, whether she is a lady or an alien empress, she's pretty much saying what I've been thinking this entire time. And I think in this case, it's like, well, I definitely don't want to be here because it's shit, right? Because it's not really worth calling a life. So I do want to be free, but there's no way I can be free other than to be freed of my physical form, right? And we've seen this with a lot of cults, in the past, where cult leaders have said, we're shackled by our physical bodies, but if we release ourselves of our physical burdens, we can be free, right? So there's like this cult element where he kind of decides, I'm going to release the spirit. In order to do that, I've got to, do that to myself, and then I'll be free. But obviously nothing really comes to it. And I will even say, like, at that point, Michelle kind of like, goes on the darker side where she's kind of egging him on. So like Donnie's saying, well, will you do this? And she's like, yes, of course I'll do this. And I'm like, I'm like, yeah, you're already manipulating someone who is easily gullible and easily manipulated. I mean, at that point, she's pretty much becoming another version of Teddy, right? Yep. So
in her defense, right? She is kidnapped by these people. So I probably would say just about anything to get out of that situation, regardless. Right, but I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Yeah, and to be fair to Michelle, I mean, when he does what he does, she's as equally shocked because she wasn't really expecting him to go that route either, right? Mm-hmm. I might be spoiling things. I mean, she eventually does get out thanks to Donnie, but not in the way that we thought it was going to happen. But
yes,
I think, but I would even go so far as to say that Don is pretty much us, the audience, in that scene, because we're trying to make sense of everything that's going on here. Mm-hmm. And at some point we're like, I can't do this anymore. I got to tap out. And well, Donnie tapped out in the only way that he could in this case.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it was a totally, like I said, kind of brutal scene to see that the character, kind of felt like he had no other options.
But at that point, though, Michelle and Teddy kind of become the same person, really, because they're both manipulating this guy. Except, to your point, in Michelle's case, she kind of has to do it because she's kind of been painted into this corner, whereas Teddy, it's like, maybe it's all those years of abuse. Maybe it's the fact that he's been given a raw deal in life and he just snapped. They're just responding to their situation, and they just happen to find this one guy, and like it or not, he becomes the punching bag. For these two.
Yep, absolutely. So, Donnie kills himself, right? Teddy comes back after killing the cop, sees his dead body there. And this is where we kind of have this confrontation between Teddy and Michelle. And Michelle takes a very interesting turn with this, right? So she's like, you know what, Teddy? I know I've screwed up. I know there's a lot of things going on here, but your mom, right? I have a cure for her, right? And I like how the cure comes out of an antifreeze drug, right? Very, very interesting, right? Because you would imagine, like, if you believe in conspiracies, right? Of course, the cure is going to be an antifreeze drug. Why would it not be, right?
I mean,
So,
if people can believe ivermectin can cure COVID, I mean, they'll believe antifreeze can cure anything. You know?
oh, look at that! Look at that! Look at that humor, topical, like it. So, but yeah, it's just totally something where it's like, yeah, sure, why not? It could be that. So, Teddy believes that, like I said, that this cure is going to help out his mom. So Teddy leaves Michelle in the basement and goes off on his bike to go cure his mom with the quote unquote antifreeze, right? So that's what he ends up doing. Now, Michelle being left in the basement, she's able to kind of escape using the keys that are on Donnie's dead body, right? So she kind of grabs the keys. However, before she kind of leaves, she notices the secret room in the background, right? And it's very subtle. And the whole time, right, I'm thinking this, and this is like the first time watching, I'm like, bitch, I know you're not about to go back in there, right? Like, if I finally was able to leave, there's not a thing in the world that's going to distract me, right? But she goes down there and she looks, and in this secret room, we see that, oh, Teddy, this is not his first go around with this, right? We see like dismembered body parts. We see like just like pictures of people like being in the chair. You see like autopsies and everything. So now you see that Teddy has been doing this to other people, right? Not just towards Michelle. This to me was like a huge turning point because it's like, God, well, this isn't Teddy's first time doing this. Like, he's gone out there and he's killed people before. And this to me is what made things very interesting. So, first off, right, for Teddy, right, the fact that he believes what Michelle is saying, I don't know if I really buy that. Did you feel like he was gullible, right? After everything he's gone through, that he just kind of like totally takes in the fact that his mom could be saved with whatever this antifreeze is? Do you feel like that was not realistic for his character? Or do you feel like that's on par with what we see?
I mean, he is desperate and gullible. And plus, she is royalty. I mean, why would royalty lie to you?
I didn't think about it like that. For me, it felt very like, I don't know. I know that he has this connection with the mom, but we've only kind of seen it in flashbacks, right? So I don't know if I got enough of a gist of how much he cared about his mom. I know, obviously, like, he had a very emotional reaction to her being like referenced. But man, like, it was just like, hey, as soon as it's like, I have a cure for your mom, like, he barely questions it. He's like, okay, I'm on my way out of here and I'm going to go do this. The other thing that was really interesting is the fact that, I kind of always thought that, this is the first time that he's tried doing this and he doesn't really know what to expect. To find out that he's, for lack of a better term, a serial killer, it definitely gives me this kind of like emotional whiplash, right? Where, we feel for this character, Teddy, right? So obviously kidnapping is bad, right? I'm not here to condone that. But obviously, he looks at Michelle as causing a lot of issues. And we see that because of what Michelle and her company did to the mom, like, I think a lot of people would empathize with that. Hey, you know what? You did something. My mom is now catatonic because of something you did. So I think that, there's a part of you that, yes, I'm not saying you should ever kidnap and torture someone because of something that they did. But I think as a person, you're going to be like, you know what? That's kind of shitty. I can totally understand this person being frustrated and pointing the blame at Michelle. But then in that same token, all of a sudden it became, well, now you've tortured and killed other people. So now I don't feel as bad for you because you're kind of just a piece of shit. So I don't know what I'm asking you, Luka, but like, I just felt like I was on a roller coaster where everything changed like minute after minute, and it was just like I didn't know where the ride was going to stop.
Well, it makes you
what type of vibes did you get from all that?
well, it makes you kind of ask the question, what were his goals with the other victims, though?
That's
Because
true.
what was he trying to get from, like, I don't know, I'll just start a random number. Like, what was he trying to get from the last 10 people that he wasn't able to get that he's now able to get with Michelle, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
you would think that after kidnapping and killing, let's say, 10 people, right? Out of those 10, he probably would have been able to get at least something out of it, but obviously
Yeah.
he wasn't, because he decides, I'm going to go after the CEO of Auxiloth. And oh, by the way, she happens to be personally responsible for putting my mother in a coma. So that's kind of like the little cherry on top to this whole I'm going to save the Earth kind of deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other interesting thing too is it's like the fact that he I believe he says that 2 of them were Andromedans, right? It makes me question how many other people were not that he killed that were human, right? Because then the whole question becomes, well, if you are so good at identifying aliens, why is it that you've identified a bunch of humans too? And how much does that factor into what you do? It like I said, the whole kind of reveal of that really just kind of put like that character on a totally different spin for me, because it's like, geez, like he's gone out there and killed innocent people over his beliefs. Now I feel like he's really kind of put himself into the you're a really shit character type of thing. So yeah, it was very interesting. So there was a lot going on with that. So
well, what also brings into question too, like he if he's saying he's doing this for the for the betterment of humanity, right? If he's trying to save humanity, I would think he would be a little bit more thorough about what he's doing.
Yeah.
Right. Because when you see like all of that, you kind of have to wonder, like, there is a process to a degree as to how he's going about doing it, but how exactly is he certain like these are the Andromedans that he's
exactly
at, right?
Yeah, like they're not like there's not like some like little creature that pops out of them, right? Like we don't really see that. Oh, the autopsy gives us any definitive things about it. They're humans that he's killing. By any stretch of the definition. So it's like, oh gosh, like what has he truly done? So, like I said, ton of interesting things going on. But yeah, so Teddy is giving the quote unquote cure to his mom, right? The mom starts to kind of like seize up, and eventually she dies, right? So the cure, quote unquote, did not work. So Teddy, very much in a rage, rushes back to the house, where we see Michelle is kind of just waiting for him now, right? Initially, she was trying to get out. Now she's just trying to, now she's just kind of waiting for him down there. And she goes into this whole explanation that, hey, I am really an alien, and you're right about a bunch of this stuff. And, we're able to save humanity. And it's time for you to step up to the plate and be a part of it. And once again, Teddy very much is like, okay, let's do this. He doesn't really bat an eye, initially, has a lot of anger for, the mom passing on, but seems to kind of just push that aside.
Yeah, he quickly forgets about that.
yes. It just kind of was like, okay, well now, now it's time to focus back on everything else I believe in, which once again kind of poses the question, did he really care that much about her? Or is this about the alien? So it just seems like his character is not certain about what he wants, but he's
it's very ambiguous.
Yes, he's in too deep to kind of get out of it now, I feel like. So,
well,
so
I was gonna say,
Mhm.
so when she's giving that whole monologue about how the Andromedans, were responsible for creating and guiding humanity, it kind of reminds me of I think it was like a cut scene from Prometheus where the engineers were talking about how they created humanity and they were trying to like guide humanity on the right path, but humanity just proved too violent.
Yeah.
That's what it reminded me of about how aliens are sort of interfering with the evolution of humanity. I would even say it kind of goes so far as to tap into the whole ancient aliens conspiracy, that aliens were responsible for not only creating humanity, but kind of build, teaching humanity how to like build and all these things like the pyramids and stuff to kind of show that there's like some sort of like ancient connection to extraterrestrials from the past,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, there definitely is a lot of that because we find out that the Andromedans killed the dinosaurs, right? So there is a lot of
accidentally, by the way, they didn't
yes,
mean
yes,
to.
it's true, accidentally, right? Because they were very unhappy with the killing of the dinosaurs. So, but yeah, so we have Michelle. So she convinces Teddy, like, hey, we have to go back to the Auxiloth headquarters, because that's where my communication device is for the mothership. So I like how when Michelle takes out the communication device, it's just a calculator, right? And I mean, she does kind of like explain, like, hey, it just had to be something mundane that you wouldn't be expecting, which made sense, right? Like, it is just something where, no one's gonna bat an eye twice to it. And I like how, as she's like trying to put in, Teddy reveals that he has this homemade bomb on him because he's prepared for any eventuality. Which Michelle's like, you know what? The Emperor will be proud of you, right? The Emperor will be proud that you have the bomb strapped to you because he likes to know that you're prepared. So once again, kind of that dark humor, the kind of the black comedy coming out with that. And Michelle types in her little code. She moves Teddy to the closet in her office because that's where the teleporter is. And when Teddy gets in there, there's an explosion, right? So Teddy's bomb prematurely went off, killing Teddy and knocking Michelle out, right? And that's how initially I was like, okay, everything's taken care of. That's the end. Did you feel like there's gonna be more? Or where was your mind once Teddy blew up? What did you think that was gonna happen?
Well, I thought initially, oh, that's pretty much it. But I saw though there was like an extra 20 minutes to that. So I'm like, they've got to add something else to this. I mean, it's not like they just had like 20 minutes and they're like, oh well, I guess everybody can leave early today,
Yeah. No, yeah, and that's exactly what I was. Like, I saw it happen. I'm like, oh damn, well, I was like, oh thank God, like she's finally saved, right? She's survived this crazy person and all this bullshit that he's been going on and on about. And I'm like, oh thank God she made it, right? I'm like, okay, well, that is a way to finish the film, right? So now she is quote unquote saved by everything that's going on, and she's finally able to kind of go about her life after being, kidnapped by this crazy person that we know is, I mean, pretty much a serial killer at this stage, for everything that's happened. But like you said, there's like 15 more minutes. So I was like, okay, what's gonna happen now, right? So we see Michelle. She's been kind of taken away via ambulance to kind of have her injuries get treated. She ends up like leaving the ambulance, and she kind of strolls back to the headquarters. She enters the closet this time, and then this time the closet teleporter works, and she gets sucked up to the mothership. And at that stage, I was like, "Oh, holy shit! I was not expecting them to go down this path." Because up until this stage, there's been literally nothing that suggests that Teddy's correct, right? There's been nothing. There's been no clues that there's truly Andromedans. There's been nothing up to this point that would kind of clue you into it. But we find out that Teddy was actually pretty on the nose with some of the stuff. He knew that, like, for instance, the hair was a communication device. So you could see he was correct with that. There was times where we kind of see like depictions of the mothership, and it looks pretty much looks just about the same as the actual mothership. So there's a bunch of things that really make me question how Teddy could have gotten all this information. But it did seem like, for the most part, that he was kind of correct with a lot of the things that were going on. And this is where Michelle, we find out that she is ultimately like the emperor, right? Like, she is the boss of all these aliens. By the way, they look so goofy with the damn like hair, like the long hair and like the weird like hair costumes. I don't know what they're going for with all that, but whatever. And Michelle decides like, hey, you know what? We've tried to deal with these humans for long enough. They're clearly jacked up and we can't control them. So the movie really ends with her killing all of humanity. She literally just like, hits a little thing and humanity's dead. And we spend like 5 minutes of just watching a bunch of people being dead as other things are going on. And that ends up being the true ending. And I did not like the true ending. I thought that if you ended it at the teleporter, right, where Teddy gets killed, I was like, you know what? That's really cool, right? And maybe you could have sprinkled in like, oh, maybe the teleporter teleported something, or there could have been something weird that made you think that, oh, maybe there was more to this teleporter than meets the eye. But they just went full blown like, no, Michelle, she was truly an alien. Teddy was right about all this stuff, and they killed humanity, the Andromedans. So yeah. So how did you like the ending? I'm very curious because I feel like this is where a lot of people are going to kind of teeter on what they enjoyed with the film.
I mean, it was a nice twist, but I felt it was a twist too far.
Yeah, I agree. I felt that for me personally, I didn't require that to enjoy the film, which is a shame because, up until then, and I guess, we can kind of wrap up now, right? Because this is the end, very kind of abruptly. But for me, the whole mystery around Teddy's character was by far the most interesting thing in this. And Jesse Plemons' performance was fantastic, right? Playing this kind of character that, is kind of like believing in all these conspiracy theories. And Michelle, right, played by Emma Stone, she correctly calls him out all the time over it. She's like, I think you're in an echo chamber. You just want to believe all this shit. Like, she plays the role so well. These two really have a great dynamic throughout the whole thing. And you really can understand everything that's going on. And I like how Teddy's character, he's shrouded by this mystery over what his true intentions are. Does he truly believe that they're aliens? Well, I guess at the end, you kind of find out that I guess he really did because he's right about everything. But in that same token, the film, it doesn't really reflect that up until the very end because all this time, you see him, as a beekeeper, he blames Auxiloth for the thing that's happening, right? There's poor working conditions where he's at, and it happens to be related to a subsidiary of Auxiloth, right? So all this stuff that he deals with, and especially the stuff with his mom having this connection with Auxiloth and kind of leaving her in this catatonic state, there's so much of it that makes you question what's Teddy's true motivation. And I really like that in this film. It really left you guessing what was going to happen. And I think it did a fantastic job for it. And I feel like for me, if it ended right at the whole teleporter sequence, I think I would probably give this a 4 out of 5. I really like this. I thought it was like really good. The dialogue is great between them, and the performances are fantastic. Like, I could not say enough for how well they do this. And a very minimalist film, right? Like, there's not a whole lot here. There's really just them in this, small little house, and they're able to make it work. So I think they did such a good job with it. But man, I felt like it would have been better if you just never really knew if she was an alien or not. I think that would have been much better than just kind of being like, blah. No, we're just going to explain everything, because the ending, like, it just felt very anticlimactic, and it just felt like it kind of ruined what the movie had gained. So I think if I was to just grade it as far as where I wish it would have ended, I would have given this a solid 4. I think it would have been graded everything, but I feel like with the ending, I probably moved it down to a 3.5. I still think that everything else carried it well up until that point, but the ending, it just left kind of this lame taste in my mouth. So I guess, Luka, what is your final thoughts about Bugonia?
I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. I mean, I genuinely enjoyed it, and I guess the ending didn't really bother me as much as it bothered you. I mean, keep in mind this is an adaptation of a South Korean film that follows a similar premise, and in the South Korean version, the Earth gets obliterated. So, I mean, they do have to follow some of the similar story beats in doing this adaptation. I really do appreciate the minimalism here. Because we've reviewed a lot of movies where they have like hundreds and hundreds of people and characters coming in and out, and you kind of don't know who to keep track of. So it's greatly appreciated when you have the small, intimate cast that's just putting on this performance that's very much character driven, right? I mean, Jesse Plemons does a phenomenal job. I can genuinely buy into the fact that he is this conspiracy theorist, right? Just like I can buy into the fact that that Emma Stone may or may not be an Andromedan empress, right? I will say this, like, I do feel like I did wish we got to see more of Don, because the way that he went out, I felt like it was a bit premature, and I would have loved to have seen him kind of go a little bit further in, maybe him kind of just like keep trying to talk Teddy out of doing all this. But obviously, Don's death is the catalyst for kind of pushing the story forward. I will say though, I do think it's kind of weird, like in this town, people don't seem to notice that much out of the ordinary, right? Because you've got this guy riding around town on a bicycle covered in blood. Nobody's stopping him, right?
That's true.
And he's been doing these murders for quite a while. Has nobody ever really wondered what happened to these people? Like, they're just carrying on like it's nothing, really.
Yeah, I mean, the police force does seem pretty inept, right? I mean, the only officer that we see is, little kid toucher, right? So, I mean, I don't know how much faith they put into the police force that exists here.
Yeah, I mean, another thing too, I'm a little bit. I'm a little bit curious as to why they keep focusing on the bees, because as much as I love beekeeping, and by the way, I actually did an interview with a beekeeper from season 1, so I will put that link somewhere in the video so you can check that out. But I felt like it was a non-entity, really. It was a non-issue. I don't know what the whole beekeeping thing was supposed to do, because unless it was one of those things where Teddy was talking to the bees and they said, yeah, that chick over there, she's an Andromedan, you should totally go after her. I really don't know why they would ever factor into the story as much.
Yeah, I think just for the bee part, for me, it just happened to be his profession, and obviously, right now the bees are.
It's not really his profession; it's more of a hobby, really.
Oh, that's true. That's true. I apologize. You are correct. Yeah. So, but I think it was mainly just to draw that connection. I think that there are some conspiracies out there about the bees, because we've been seeing less and less of them. There's been a lot of questions over why exactly it's been happening. So I think there is some, kind of weird stuff out there for that. But yeah, I totally what you're meaning. It wasn't a huge thing out there.
So Lee, do you have any final thoughts before we take us out here?
No, I would just say, this is, I think to me, I like this one significantly better than One Battle After Another. I will say, and I do feel like this is one of those films that, I mean, it just works, right? I think that it has some really compelling storytelling that really kind of keeps you guessing, and I just felt like this went a little bit too much for me. But that's it. Luke, you can take us out, man.
Well, I mean, be sure to check out other shows on the channel. We have a lot of content coming out over the next few months. And let us know down in the comments below what your thoughts are, if you enjoyed Bugonia, or if you're a fan of Yorgos Lanthimos overall. And remember to like, comment, subscribe. We are slowly growing our channel, so again, if you can hit the subscribe button, it'll keep you in the loop, and it will definitely help us out. But other than that, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next review.
Yep.